Hello, and welcome to Sustainability Marketing Lecture 12, Reframing Sustainability Marketing. This is Episode 1, Thinking Again about Sustainability Marketing. In this episode, we'll be thinking again about sustainability marketing. In the second episode, we'll be looking at how we can make progress towards a sustainable society. And finally, we'll have Episode 3, an interview in which we'll review the context of this lecture, but also think more broadly about sustainability marketing as a whole. The learning outcomes for this episode: the first is to review the evolution of the relationship between marketing and sustainability and think about the key elements of sustainability marketing. And then secondly, to understand the role that social marketing can play in contributing towards more sustainable behaviours. In terms of the structure of the episode, we'll look at the evolution of the relationship between marketing and sustainability again. We'll think about sustainability marketing and why maybe it takes us beyond the conventional notions of marketing. We'll also look at social marketing as a particular type of marketing that's also contributing towards sustainability, and then start to look ahead at where to next, where social marketing, sustainability marketing, and really society go in moving towards a more sustainable future. So when we talked earlier on in Lecture 1, we talked a little bit about the evolution of marketing and its relationship to sustainability, and that the initial roots of that relationship were back in the 1970s, and concept of ecological marketing. And that really arose from concerns about things like overuse of resources, particular major pollution incidents, and it was related to a relatively small number of industries. So the car industry, the oil industry, the chemicals industry, for example, came under pressure for their perceived environmental impacts. But for most companies and for most industries, at that time it was not particularly seen as relevant to their strategies. During the 1980s, we saw the emergence of green marketing, with the notion of the green consumer as a potential target and opportunity for marketers to market to. Research data told us that a wider range of consumers than ever were concerned about environmental issues and social issues, and that had the potential to be reflected in their consumption behaviours. And so we saw new brands, new companies, new products, new technologies emerging, really to try and tap into that perceived market of green consumers as an opportunity for marketers. This has emerged over the last few years into a new and perhaps more holistic version of the relationship between marketing and sustainability in terms of sustainability marketing. And that's what this book and the lectures that we've been presenting here are trying to really present to you. The idea that it's sustainability and marketing creating a much deeper and more comprehensive relationship, taking into account potentially all forms of industry and all forms of consumer, not just those particular consumers with the greatest concern about environmental or social issues and a willingness to pay an additional premium to buy greener or more socially responsible products. That was really the focus more of environmental marketing in the 1980s and 90s. So we would argue it's really the emergence of a new, a different type of marketing and what we hope will become the marketing of the future. During the previous lectures, we've looked at the different elements of sustainability marketing, about the importance of marketers understanding the socio and ecological problems and issues that relate to their products, their companies, their production systems, both at a micro and a macro level. We've looked at how companies can develop a value set within the company and a strategy to try and find new products, new services, new ways to develop more sustainable goods and services for their markets, and in particular, how to understand their consumers in terms of their response to social and environmental issues, and in terms of how to connect those social and environmental problems and the solutions that companies can develop to them, to the needs, the wants, and really the understanding and interests of those consumers. In terms of implementing that strategy, we've gone through our alternative sustainability marketing mix. The notion not just of developing a product or a service, but thinking in terms of a customer solution, something that presents the customer with a new way or a different way of consuming, of meeting a need, of living, of behaving, which still gives consumers the benefits and value they're looking for, but perhaps in ways that are less environmentally or socially damaging. We've looked at notions of customer cost and how to try and make those products and services and solutions that we're offering to customers not simply affordable in a financial sense, but low cost in terms of the effort, the time, maybe the psychological wear and tear that comes from particular approaches to consumption. We've talked also about delivering convenience to consumers, not simply through getting the distribution of products effective and environmentally efficient, but in terms of all forms of convenience, in terms of making products readily available for customers, easy to use, easy to dispose of, and really attractive because they're convenient. And finally, we also talked about communications in terms of developing a relationship with customers, not simply providing them with information or not simply trying to persuade them to take up the sustainability solutions that we've developed, but really trying to develop a long-term relationship with consumers that's the basis for an ongoing value relationship into the future. We'd argue that sustainability marketing is in many ways an unconventional approach to marketing. Because if we think about how marketing has evolved over a field over many decades and how it focuses, it tends to think very much about the consumer as an individual and about thinking about their individual wants. It's tended also to think about purchase as an activity that consumers engage in, and most of the focus of marketers' attention is understanding consumers and understanding really how to promote purchases as an actual activity. And then finally about the economic and legal aspects of the consumption process in terms of the transfer of the product to the customer, that transfer of ownership and really the sense of satisfaction the customer gets from owning that product. In sustainability marketing, the focus is slightly different. It's on thinking, yes, about customers and their wants and needs, as we do in conventional marketing, but putting it more in the social context of consumption and understanding what the collective consumption consequences for those individual consumers' behaviours and decisions and lifestyles might be. It's understanding consumption as a total process where purchase is only one part and maybe purchase is even avoided if customers can find alternative ways of meeting their needs. And really thinking about the development of marketing and marketing relationships in terms of a long-term flow of resources within industries and markets and a long-term flow of value as a value relationship to consumers. So it is an unconventional way of thinking about things. And just to explore why is it unconventional in greater depth, partly the difference between sustainability marketing and conventional marketing comes from the time horizon. Sustainability, sustainable development are very open-ended concepts. They're something that one travels towards. And so it's not something that necessarily can be completely enshrined within or achieved within a 1 or 5 year marketing plan, for example. It's something that very much has to be worked towards. In terms of the notion of stakeholders, rather than thinking about marketing responsibilities and marketing interests being confined to the consumer and meeting their needs and the shareholder and generating a profit for them, it involves thinking about the whole range of stakeholders who are impacted by a business and its products and its production activities, and also thinking about those stakeholders in the outside environment that may have an impact on the business itself. So it's thinking more broadly in terms of who has an interest in the business. And then finally, the sense of responsibilities, thinking that companies don't just have a responsibility to market products and services and solutions to customers at a profit, but it also has responsibilities to future generations, to the communities within which they operate, and to broader society about the impacts of both the consumption activities of consumers and also the production activities of companies and the supply chains behind them. Another slightly unusual aspect in terms of thinking about marketing and sustainability is that it's not only commercial marketers who practice marketing to try and promote sustainable lifestyles and sustainable consumption behaviours. Many other types of organisations, branches of government, for example, and NGOs are increasingly looking to try and influence consumer behaviour, perhaps to encourage consumers to lead a lower energy lifestyle, perhaps looking to encourage them to cycle or walk on journeys to work rather than commuting, maybe to eat more healthily, maybe to exercise more, maybe to change a whole different variety of elements of their lifestyle to try and make their lives healthier and also more sustainable. And social marketing is one discipline that's practiced not in the commercial sphere as much, although commercial companies often do have an interest and play a part, but it's a wider notion of marketing and what can be achieved through marketing in terms of promoting sustainable behaviours and lifestyles. We also have new types of businesses and enterprise, I think, taking a lead very often in sustainable solutions and in sustainability marketing. Social enterprise, in particular, is a type of business that has become increasingly prevalent in many countries throughout Europe, throughout Latin America. We're seeing many more in North America, in Africa, and also in Asia. And social enterprises are businesses that are not primarily for-profit businesses. They may generate a profit, some do, and if you think back to the case study of One Water that we looked at in Lecture 10, One Water is very much a brand aiming to generate a profit, but all that profit is aimed to be funded or to use to fund water projects in Africa. There is no sense of generating a profit for shareholders. And increasingly we're seeing small businesses, community businesses, very often being developed that are social enterprises. They're not fundamentally there to create money. They're there often to tackle social and environmental issues. Very often they're there with a mission to provide employment for people who perhaps are usually excluded from the employment marketplace. So it's a very intriguing notion of business, because if you're not a for-profit business, you don't have to generate a profit. You can just run at a break-even level. And that can allow some businesses to operate on that basis, for example, within very poor communities, whereby not having a requirement to generate 5 or 10% profit margins allows you to serve the needs of relatively poor consumers from which a profit cannot be made. So social enterprise is an important way of making consumption more democratic in many countries, and in delivering sustainable solutions to markets where there isn't really enough wealth there to generate a profitable business as well as a sustainable business. Different types of social enterprise are also very active in some of the key markets for sustainability. If we look at housing in particular, things like housing cooperatives have often been leaders in finding new, more sustainable forms of housing and often more affordable housing solutions to offer to consumers. Social enterprises are very strong within the food market, for example, with food cooperatives extremely widely found in many countries, and also in waste and environmental protection, that again, social enterprises tend to play a very significant role there. So it's interesting that in some of these markets that are most crucial for the development of sustainability solutions, we're actually seeing quite different types of businesses emerge through social enterprise to tackle these markets. One of the interesting findings is if we look at social enterprises as types of business and why they sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, the research into social enterprise indicates that one of the areas where they tend to be weak is actually marketing. They're often run by very sort of inspired individuals, very charismatic individuals, people like Duncan Goose from One Water, for example. In his case, he was an experienced marketing practitioner with a background in the advertising industry, so he really understood marketing. But many of the people behind social enterprises are not necessarily very marketing savvy. So areas like packaging, for example, and provision of information for consumers have been shown by research to be some of the areas that social enterprises are weakest in when they're trying to develop their sustainability solutions for particular markets. Another area in which sustainability marketing tends to be unconventional is in the relationships that develop between companies and their consumers. We talked in earlier lectures about the move away from these very linear supply chains where the consumer is really the end point of the consumption process, with an assumption that whatever they've consumed will be thrown away into landfill, and that will be the end of the story. Moving instead over time towards sustainable loops and supply loops, where consumers are taking back old product that can be reused, or just simply material that can be recycled that still has value, putting that back into the supply chain, and the consumer becoming not just the target and the recipient of the marketer's effort, but also becoming a supplier, and in some other cases becoming a co-creator, where companies are working closely with their customers to develop those solutions so that the customer has a vested interest in being the co-designer of a particular sustainability solution, not simply its recipient. And then finally, in Lecture 11, Frank talked about the transformational nature of sustainability marketing. That very often within companies, within communities, within industries, even within broader societies, we're seeing companies who are concerned about sustainability, that have integrated social and environmental issues very strongly into their values and their strategy and their mission, really trying to make a transformational change so that we have different types of company and community and societies within which to live, really with the aim of making the move towards sustainability at a societal level much more possible. I mentioned a bit about social marketing. I'd like to say a little bit more because it's an interesting topic to look at in relation to sustainability. The vast majority of this book and these lectures have been dedicated to commercial marketing, where businesses of some form or other, whether for-profit businesses or social enterprises, are seeking to do a fairly conventional marketing job of developing some form of sustainability solution and market it to companies using communications techniques, thinking about issues of customer cost and convenience, and so on. And social marketing involves taking those same types of techniques, that same discipline of marketing, the same philosophy of marketing, and applying it to other organizations and businesses. So applying it to, for example, arms of government, NGOs, charities, places like hospitals, schools, for example, places that are not necessarily conventional businesses might look to really try and influence their targets' behavior to make them more sustainable, more healthy, and more beneficial to society. The definition you see there is the one from Kotler and Lee, which is a very well-known one for social marketing. That's the use of marketing principles and techniques to influence a target audience, really to change their behavior. So it's the idea to adopt a new behavior or reject an old behavior. And it's this focus on behavior change, which is absolutely fundamental to social marketing. Now, that behavior might be a product. You might want to socially market against people buying and smoking cigarettes. Or it might be more of a lifestyle issue. You might want people to adopt taking more exercise or eating a lower fat diet, for example. But increasingly what we're finding is the social marketing efforts of public sector organizations are really coming into contact with the social marketing, the sustainability marketing efforts of commercial enterprises. And they're beginning to interact and in many cases intertwine, and in some cases conflict, where potentially a social marketer is trying to encourage people not to smoke, where of course the tobacco company are trying to encourage more people to smoke. So social marketers and commercial marketers can come into conflict. But in the sustainability arena, what we're seeing is much more in the way of collaboration and cooperation between conventional and sustainability-orientated commercial marketing and the social marketing efforts in the public sector. Just to show how that sort of works in practice, this is the social marketing customer triangle model from the National Social Marketing Centre that's been established in the UK. And like commercial marketing, it's putting the customer, in this case, at the very centre of the organisation's activity. And through notions of marketing research, very similar to commercial organisations, understanding the behaviour of people in their lifestyles, using behavioural theory, and establishing behavioural goals to try and make people maybe exercise more or reduce their car use or insulate their homes, for example. From that, an intervention is developed which has its own marketing mix, often with the notion of exchange. So you try and point out the benefit to the customer of the behaviour. So for example, the benefit from insulating your home might be reduced energy bills. And similar to commercial marketing, it starts to think about competition in terms of not necessarily other businesses that you're competing against, but perhaps other ideas, other ways of doing things, even to think about apathy or inertia amongst the consumer as a competitor to them actually adopting the behaviour you'd like them to adopt. And again, similar to commercial marketing, thinking about the segmentation of an audience, that not everybody will respond to an issue the same way, and so you need a marketing mix that takes into account the differences between particular types of customer, the difference between particular types of segment. Now, this is a very different way of approaching the idea of changing people's behaviour to what's conventionally been done by governments. Conventionally, governments have tended to go for big information campaigns that try and encourage people to save energy in the home or to eat healthily or to manage their homes in a more energy efficient way. So typically big blanket campaigns relying on mass media advertising, not very customized, and no real direct reward or reason for the customer to get involved in the behaviour that governments would like us to adopt. And I think as we move towards not just a commercial agenda for sustainability, but also a political agenda for sustainability, more and more governments around the world are turning to marketing through social marketing as a way of influencing citizens and trying to encourage them to live more sustainable lives. And in doing so, very often they're putting them on not a collision course is probably the wrong word, but in terms of a path in which they're going to start coming up against the sustainability marketing efforts of commercial companies also interested in promoting sustainable lifestyles. So it's a very different agenda, I think, to the one we've seen in previous decades when the efforts of companies and the efforts of governments to try and influence people as either citizens or consumers were really seen as very separate. Increasingly, they're beginning to come together. And social marketing, I think, like sustainability marketing, is also increasingly understanding the extent to which understanding people's behaviour, trying to change people's behaviour, is about understanding people in their social context. So if we want to influence an individual to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle, that very often means engaging with their family and friends, understanding the way in which their lifestyle is influenced by the community within which they live and the neighbourhood within which they find themselves, down to things like if people use public transport or not. It may not be simply down to whether or not they would like to use public transport, but it may be down to things like the availability, the infrastructure, and even down to things like whether they feel there's sufficient shelter to stand and wait for a bus in the locality in which they are. So understanding that the structure and nature of the communities we live in also influence our behaviour. And finally, the idea of wider society, that the issue of social norms, for example, is a very strong influence on behaviour. And most people want to be thought of as normal. They want to think of themselves as normal. They want other people to think of themselves, of them as normal. And for a long time, through the 1970s ecological marketing era, also through the green marketing era, the 1980s and the 1990s, sustainability initiatives tended to attract this alternative tag. It was seen of alternative consumption. So fair trade suppliers were called alternative trade organisations. And really, some people really like being alternative and thought of as alternative, but most people would like to be thought of as normal and part of the mainstream. So our behaviour as individuals, our behaviour as citizens and as consumers is really very strongly influenced by the society in which we live, the values and norms of that society, and our desire to fit in within them. And I think many social marketers looking to implement social change throughout a society have begun to understand the importance of structuring campaigns that address all these different levels that do influence individuals. Now, I mentioned that social marketing and its concern about promoting sustainable lifestyles is beginning to come together with commercial marketing's efforts to develop sustainability solutions for consumers. And there are various examples emerging of where we can see the two coming together. On the slide behind me, on your right, you'll see a report entitled Selling Sustainability, 7 Lessons from Advertising and Marketing to Sell Low Carbon Living. And although personally I don't really like the selling element of this because I think it's really about marketing rather than about selling, this is a report I was involved in writing for the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts within the UK. And it was interesting because it was a project that brought together marketing practitioners from some of the leading advertising agencies, companies like Ogilvy, marketing communications agencies like Millward Brown. And it brought those commercial marketing experts together with the mission to say, well, if you were trying to sell sustainable lifestyles, or I should say market sustainable lifestyles to consumers, if you were, for example, a government agency, how would you go about it? And how would the lessons that have been accrued from many decades of commercial marketing and commercial advertising success, how could that be used by other types of organisation to develop their own campaigns and develop their own relationships with consumers and with citizens? And so the report that was developed there, and there's a handy 7-point guide as well to go with it, is very much aimed at marketing communicators not operating in the commercial world. So marketing communicators working for government, national government, local government, other public service organisations who are looking to promote sustainability and sustainable lifestyles amongst citizens, and who maybe don't have the marketing background to call upon. And this takes a lot of commercial marketing expertise from campaigns, for example, like the Dove soap campaign for Real Beauty, which did a great deal in terms of helping to shift ideas about beauty and how it's portrayed in the media and how it's portrayed in advertising and how it might relate to people's lives and their consumption behaviours, to try and take lessons from very successful campaigns like that, to say, well, how can we maybe encourage people to want to lead different types of lives, have different lifestyles, and in particular, in the case of this report, look at low carbon behaviours and how can we market those in ways that were particularly attractive to consumers. Another very interesting example, I think, where the commercial sustainability marketing and social marketing for sustainability have really become very blurred, is in Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan. This plan is part of Unilever's global strategy for sustainability, developed over the last few years. And it's a strategy that tries to encompass the totality of the company's operations and the totality of the consumption process, all the way from production of the materials and the products that the company sells, through to trying to influence the usage of customers and customer lifestyles to try and improve the sustainability performance of the customers' lifestyles, as well as showing the way in which the company's products relate to those lifestyles. And it's really a very innovative and holistic way of thinking about the business and thinking about a commercial strategy which goes beyond really the bounds of conventional marketing strategies to think about how do the lives of our customers really interact with the products and the solutions that we provide for them, and how can we as a company perhaps help to find new and innovative ways of helping our customers to lead more sustainable lives, if we think of those lives in a relatively holistic way. And just to help illustrate really quite how interesting and holistic and innovative the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan is, I'd just like to show you a very short video which tries to encapsulate the key elements of that strategy. So that was Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan, and I think if we look at those 5 levers for change that is central to the Unilever strategy, of helping customers to understand the sustainability issues that they face, to make adopting the sustainability solutions that Unilever are developing nice and easy, to make it attractive and desirable for consumers, to find ways of highlighting the rewards that are available to consumers from adopting a particular sustainability solution, and then really to help make the consumer make the step from a purchase being maybe a fairly conscious decision to it becoming a habit, an integrated part of their lifestyle. So to a very large extent, this represents a coming together of conventional notions of marketing expressed through sustainability marketing, and ideas we might think of more about social marketing in terms of behavior change and helping people to adopt new types of lifestyle. So in terms of where do we go next with sustainable marketing and the development of more sustainable production and consumption systems, I think we can see it very much as an evolutionary journey that was begun in the 1970s with the ecological marketing era, at the point where it was very much about pollution and those kind of impacts and pollution control. I think gradually you saw businesses developing more integrated processes to try and reduce resource use, for example, reduce waste, to more ideas of thinking about businesses as holistic entities and trying to find new sort of whole systems way of creating more sustainable products in terms of less energy efficient, less materially wasteful. And that's really probably the point at which many industries and businesses have reached together. I think the next couple of steps that we need to make to create really much more fundamentally sustainable economies and societies and businesses is to begin to adopt different perspectives. Industrial ecology is one perspective where we start to think of businesses not like the relatively mechanistic systems that we're used to in conventional business thinking, but thinking almost more from an ecological perspective. So the whole business in terms of its inputs, its outputs, the balance that it achieves, really trying to say, can we get our industries and our businesses to reach a more sustainable balance, almost more like ecological systems do. And then finally, the idea of a fundamental transformation, not just to individual companies and individual consumers changing their lifestyles, but moving the whole of communities and societies towards more sustainable ways of living and a more sustainable society as a whole. And that really is a tremendous challenge for businesses to become a part of, as well as consumers, as well as politicians, and really society as a whole is facing really quite a significant challenge in terms of making that transformation to sustainability. And that's some of the issues that we'll pick up in more detail in the next episode. So in terms of review and discussion questions for this episode, we'd like you to think about the stages the relationship between marketing and socio-environmental issues has gone through over the past 40 years and the implications of that evolution. What aspects of sustainability marketing make it different to conventional marketing? And also the implications of commercial marketers and social marketers from the public sector beginning to converge on these issues about promoting sustainable behaviours and really what the implications might be for both parties. Here are the references for this particular episode. The last chapter, chapter 12 of our book, Sustainability Marketing, of course. Also, I'd recommend the Nestor report, Selling Sustainability, which despite the rather unfortunate title focusing on selling, is very interesting in terms of looking at marketing and how marketing can go beyond the commercial sector to be used by other types of organisations to promote sustainable lifestyles. And finally, I'd recommend Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan Progress Report, which really shows the extent to which businesses are starting to become innovative, forward-looking and very holistic in thinking about both their businesses and the lifestyles of their consumers and how the two can be brought together sustainably. So thank you very much for listening and bye for now.